Hello and welcome back. I'm Morgan and this is my channel, Pisces Paperbacks. Today I wanted to talk about all the books I read in September because today, right now, it's the nighttime on September 30th and tomorrow October starts. Very exciting. Very excited. I read 16 books this month. There were 12 adult books and 4 young adult books, which is, I feel, a pretty fair split considering that I read a lot of adult romance this month. Actually 15 books and 1 like short story novella thing, but we can talk about that when we get there. The first book I read this month was Halfway to the Grave by Jeaniene, which is an adult urban fantasy romance novel. I gave this book 3 stars. It follows Kat, who is a half vampire hunter, trying to kill vampires in order to avenge her mother who was assaulted, resulting in Kat. And basically, while she is out hunting vampires, she is caught by a very powerful vampire named Bones, who I love and adore. He's like an asshole, but I love him. He's great. And they kind of strike up a bargain where they have to work together, and it just kind of goes from there. I really enjoyed this book. I did give it 3 stars, and that's because a lot of my enjoyment is the fact that I've read the next 2 books in the series now, and I will talk about those in just a second. This book was really good in that it kind of really laid the groundwork for what the world looks like, while not giving away too much. I will say that Kat kind of has a very slut-shamey internal monologue when it comes to the way that they capture vampires and the way she kind of views herself. I will also say that the end of this book is not really conclusive. I don't feel like there was a really good emotional resolution, and that might be because I'm not used to books having sequels, so maybe it's just me, but I didn't really like the end of this book. The end of this book made me like mad, but in a way where I really wanted to read the next 2 or the next books. And I will actually talk about those right now. The next book in this series is called One Foot in the Grave, and I gave that 3.5 stars. And then the third book is called At Gravesend, and I gave that 4 stars. So they're getting better and better as they go on. I think one thing that I really liked about the next 2, and I'm not going to give plot summaries because it is a spoiler for the end of the first book, but the first book kind of felt, after reading these second 2, like it was a necessary prologue to what the actual series was going to be, whereas these next books feel more like they're movie installments in a series with characters that you already know and love. So they have a clear beginning, middle, ending, and the ending is emotionally conclusive. I really liked them. It develops the relationship between Kat and Bones like really well. Like, they're so cute. One of my favorite couples I've read in a really long time. Their banter is really good. The way that they care about each other is really intense, without the typical trappings of like obsessive, suffocating love in a lot of these books. So I just really enjoyed the way that they handled each other. I think Kat's mother is insufferable. Like, I hate her character, but she is the way she is for a reason. I will also say that one of the reasons that they like hunt vampires is because in this universe, vampires don't need to kill humans to feed on them. They have like vampire mind control, and they can do that thing where when they bite you it doesn't hurt, all that stuff. So they're only killing vampires who are murderers, who like killed humans. But the thing is, by the time that we're at the end of the 3rd book, Kat and Bones have like together murdered like way more vampires than any vampire has killed humans in that time. Like, seriously, it's a lot. They're like single-handedly decimating the American vampire population. It's really funny to think about because that's kind of a large part of their, like, a cornerstone of their moral code, or at least Kat's moral code, is that she's only killing vampires who kill humans, and she has like murdered people before. Like, they're vampires, but it's like murder, you know what I mean? But she's still a really fun character. The next 3 books I'm going to talk about are also a series, and they are the McCabe Brothers trilogy by Meyer. The first one is called In Bed with a Highlander, which I gave 3 stars. The second one is Seduction of a Highland Lass, and I also gave that one 3 stars. And the third one is Never Love a Highlander. I also gave that one 3 stars. And they're all 3 stars in different ways. The first one is, I'm not going to give summaries of these. They're like Highlander. I guess I'll give a summary. So the first one is about the oldest of the 3 brothers, and he rescues a woman, Miriam. That's wrong, but it starts with an M, who is about to be forced to marry another man because she is the daughter of the late king, and she has an inheritance when she has a child. And so he rescues her, and they ended up having to get married anyway, like her and the oldest brother. And it's about their relationship. And this one was the first book, so I wasn't really used to Maya Banks' style yet, and not her writing style, but the fact that her books feel like Julie Garwood ripoffs, except less successfully. My problem with the first book is that there is this overarching kind of plot point where the McCabe Brothers' father had been murdered by a man they thought was an ally, and so there's just like stuff happening, and they want to get revenge, and it just felt like at the end that they're just the bad guy plot like didn't come up enough during the book. Like, it was just very random. There was a traitor that was just a random guy. Like, there was no lead up to this man's betrayal. So that wasn't super successful in my opinion, but I did like their relationship. The second book is about the second brother who, on his way to go marry the daughter of the neighboring clan, is attacked and has to be healed by this woman in like a house he finds, and then they fall in love. This was probably my least favorite of the 3 books. I felt that there was the least romantic chemistry between the main characters. They really don't have any conversations besides talking about how much they want to bang, which is like kind of annoying. Her name was Keely. I don't know. This book was, I think, also the most risque in the content of the sex scenes, but I didn't particularly like them. I'm not saying that they went too far, but the way that the author decided to make them like very steamy was, I felt a little derogatory towards the woman, and I just wasn't a huge fan. And then the third book is about the youngest brother who is taking the middle brother's place in the marriage to the daughter of the neighboring clan, and it's the conclusion to the whole big bad plot line. This was, I think the first one was my favorite overall, but the heroine in the third book, her name was Riona, I do remember that, was my favorite, and I was actually really disappointed when she wasn't in the second book, but whatever. She was interesting because she wanted to be a warrior, she knew how to fight with a sword, and I liked that book. I thought it was a perfectly fine conclusion to the series, but it was just a 3-star read, you know what I mean? 2 things overall kind of bothered me with this series that are my actual complaints. One was that one thing Maya Banks does in her books is that the woman is put in physical danger, and then it is the opening opportunity for the men to act protective and be alpha and like admit to their feelings because the woman gets hurt. They're like, oh, how can I live without you? I can't live without you. All that stuff. The problem was that over the course of these 3 books, these women are like beat up, like poisoned, shot, punched, like beaten, almost assaulted. Like, they're like put in danger. And then the men are like not. Like, there's no like emotional other way about it, you know what I mean? It was just very weird. And then the second thing is that usually in books like these, you can read them independently without reading the whole series, and you like get a grasp of what the overall plot is, and this does that, but usually there's at least a couple paragraphs like actually explaining the events of the previous books, and this one just didn't do that. And I felt like even though I was reading them back to back to back, like over the course of 3 days I read these books, I was still losing some things, and I felt like if somebody else just picked these up, like just picked up the third one to read it, you really wouldn't understand like all of the background and stuff, and it was just very odd, and I just didn't really like it. The next book I read was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, and I gave this 4.5 stars. I loved this book. I think this book was a masterpiece. Basically, this book is about the narrator who has 8 days to discover who killed Evelyn Hardcastle, and she dies at this party at the end of the day. But it's not 8 consecutive days. It's the same day lived 8 times in 8 different bodies. So good. I think that this was really ambitious. I think there were a lot of threads at play. The thrill that I got from the reveal at the end was like, oh my god, so good. I didn't give it a full 5 stars because there's an additional twist at the end that I didn't particularly love. I didn't think it added to the story, but I know a lot of people like actually hate that twist, and I didn't like hate it. I just kind of feel like, I just like, in my head it doesn't really connect with the story, so I don't consider it part of the story. But I really loved this book. I think that there were some plot threads that got a little tangled and weren't quite as well executed as they could be. But overall, this was like a really, really fantastic, fantastical mystery read. It was very it had a foggy fall vibe, and it was like set in, I believe, England in the 1920s? I'm not really sure. The cars exist, but not everybody uses them, if that's like a time frame reference. I just thought it was really, really well done. Personally, I love when my dog is coming. I don't know if you can hear her. I love when the same event is relived but retold from different perspective. It's one of my favorite like plot devices. So I just thought this was like really just the book for me. It hit the spot. It was really good. The next 2 books I want to talk about are both by Tessa. The first is a novella called Beauty and the Blacksmith, which I gave 4 stars, and a full-length novel called A Night to Surrender, which I also gave 4 stars. So I read Beauty and the Blacksmith first, and it is actually a novella in the Spindle Cove series that Tessa has going on, which takes place after A Night to Surrender, but I read it first. And it is about Diana, I think her name is, and she is a proper young woman who's very beautiful. Her mother wants her to marry up. She is beautiful enough to marry up, but she actually has feelings for the town blacksmith, which is, you know, below her station. And it's a novella, so there's not really an overarching plot beyond the development of their relationship, but I actually really enjoyed this because there was so much relationship development. They actually talk to each other. They talk about what they want in life and what they like, and they get to know each other. And there also is a good sex scene, so that's fine. I just really enjoyed this, and it made me want to read the rest of the Spindle Cove series, which I did, starting with A Night to Surrender, which is the first book in the Spindle Cove series. It follows Susanna Finch, who is the daughter of the local nobleman, and she wants to kind of defend the reputation of Spindle Cove as a safe place to send your daughters when you don't know what to do with them. And Victor Bramwell, I think is his name. He's fine. He's cool, but he is a soldier who wants to regain his command after a pretty significant injury to his leg. And basically, it's about their relationship. I really liked their relationship. It was my favorite part of the book. I think a lot of the external plot having to do with kind of like men versus women in this town that's supposed to be like a safe haven for women really got on my nerves. There was a lot of like, men need to be men, they need to feel powerful. Like, there was a little too much of that. It kind of got on my nerves, but I liked this book, and I definitely want to read the rest of the series. I want to read more Tessa books. I really like the way it was written. I think that she had a lot of range in the types of dynamics, like relationship dynamics that she wrote, so I'm definitely interested to read more from her. The next book I want to talk about is Ravished by Amanda Quick, and this book was 5 stars. This was the first 5-star Amanda Quick book I've read in a really long time, which is great since I keep saying she's my favorite romance author. But it was really good. It follows Harriet Pomeroy, I believe, who discovers what she believes is a smuggling ring in these caves nearby her house that she goes into to find fossils. So she contacts the man whose property the caves are underneath, and he comes by, and his name's Gideon, and he is called the Beast. He's not really accepted in society. He was accused of being the cause of a girl who decided to commit suicide several years before. And so he just doesn't have the best social reputation. But they work together to solve the mystery of the smuggling ring. It's actually so cute. Like, for an adult romance with, like, some smutty scenes, like, it was very light on that. Like, it was so wholesome. Like, they defend each other to other people, and they understand each other on a level that it's really, if they were real people, like, I would say that they understand each other. And that's something that can be kind of assumed in a lot of romance novels when people are, like, supposed to be soulmates. But it's not often that you see it written out so well that it's really clear that two people are truly suited and truly complement each other like that. And I just really enjoyed reading it. I smiled the whole time, and I just flew through it. I read it in less than a day. It was just so cute, and I just want to read more like that. That book is one of her older ones. I believe it was published in 1996, so it is older than me, which possibly isn't a good sign if I like her older stuff better, but, you know, it be like that. I'm going to read more because I can't stop. I just kicked something. I don't know if you heard it. The next book I want to talk about is Hand in Gloved by Ngiao Marsh. This is a fairly old mystery. I believe this was published in 1962. But basically, I was at Half Price Books. Yes, 1962. I was at Half Price Books, and I was like, you know what? I want to read some mysteries. Like I said, I don't know if I said it actually, but the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle really, like, awoke a desire in my soul to, like, read a whodunit. So I was like, I need some Agatha Christie books. And I got all 3 Agatha Christie books that I was there, and then I was like, I need something like Agatha Christie. And I looked it up, and Ngiao Marsh was on that list. So these are cozy mysteries, I guess is what they're called. But this is a book about, I believe, 6 or 7 people who kind of all know each other, and there's some stuff going on, and then they all go to a party, and the next day someone's dead. And this inspector is called in from London to solve the mystery. I gave this 2.5 stars. It wasn't particularly bad. Like, it wasn't bad, but I just really didn't like any of the characters. I thought it was frustrating that the inspector didn't really come into the story until halfway through, so he wasn't really connected to the events in any way. I will also say that it was just a little boring at some points. It would have been nice if, like, any of the characters liked each other. Is that bad to say? I don't know. I have another book by Ngiao Marsh with the same inspector, Richard Allen, I believe is his name. And I'm gonna read it. But I don't know if this is gonna be like a go-to author for me. It doesn't really give me the same feeling as I remember having when I read Agatha Christie, and that's kind of what I'm looking for, is this feeling of, like, wonder and discovery upon the, like, realization of who done it. It's such a stupid thing to say, but you know what I mean. So yeah, this was not a fave. That's fine. They don't all need to be faves. But you know what is a fave? Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Okay. I will say, I give this book 5 stars. It is about a girl named Spencer, it's a sci-fi novel that takes place on a planet in space where all of humanity is kind of forced to live underground because they are attacked periodically by an alien race called the Krell. She desperately wants to be a pilot, but when she was a child, her father famously defected in the middle of a battle, and so she has been labeled the daughter of a coward, which is the worst thing you can be. And it's just kind of about her trying to get into flight school and all of this stuff. I loved this book. There are some very valid complaints that people have with it. People have said I believe. I remember from other videos that other people's like reviews and stuff that the characters are somewhat flat, that Spensa's character arc, she doesn't really learn very much until the end. People have said like some parts were confusing, or the world building, I don't know. Specifically, I think there were complaints about Spensa being kind of a boring main character, or possibly not developing enough, and the secondary characters being pretty one-dimensional. I agree with both of those things. I think Spensa is very, very stubborn. She's very sure of who she is, and she doesn't want to change. And I definitely agree that all of the secondary characters are pretty one-dimensional. I think that there's not enough emotional significance put onto her relationships with them until probably it's too late. But I will say, with my whole chest, this book is greater than the sum of its parts. Like, when I think about this book, I just think about how much I loved reading it. Like, I flew through it. I really, really enjoyed it. I think it was fantastically written, very, like, understandable and easily digestible sci-fi, which I find is somewhat a problem sometimes, which this is young adult, so it's automatically kind of like aged down in that way. But I loved Spensa. I loved how stubborn and sure of herself she was. I loved how confident in her goals she was, while also, you know, being more reflective internally. There were some side characters I thought were kind of annoying, but I feel like the second book is coming out in November, which is like so close. I'm so excited. And I feel like the end of this book really lays the groundwork for some amazing relationships in the second book. And I am so excited. This was a gift that my aunt got me when I graduated college, and I'm so glad I have it. I love it so much. And what can I just really liked it. You know, sometimes you read a book and you can't particularly justify, you know, why you rate it the way you do or why you feel about it the way you do. You just have to accept that you really liked something, you know? And that's just how I feel about this one. Last but not least, I want to talk about the Twilight series, specifically New Moon, Eclipse, and Breaking Dawn. Let me put these down 1 second. So I have not been talking about these books in the order that I read them. I've been kind of grouping them as I go along with like books. And throughout the month, I have been listening to the audiobooks of the Twilight series. And that started with New Moon. I gave this book 5 stars, which is very different than when I first rated it when I first read it, because this was originally my least favorite book in the trilogy, in the series, because Edward wasn't there. What can I say? I'm an Edward girl. I always have been. However, listening to this now, I realize that I really have not sat down and read this series cover to cover since the first time I've read it. So it's been 10 years, and the rest of the time I was just flipping through to my favorite scenes or going back to my favorite emotional parts, whatever like that. But having this read to me through an audiobook, you're not allowed to skim, you know? You have to listen to every word. And because I was listening to every word, it became painfully clear to me that Jacob is the best character in the series, which sucks because I'm like I was like always Team Edward, so but you know what I mean. Anyway, so I read this and I really, really liked it. This was some of the best character development Bella ever got. And that's just the truth. It's some of the best world building in the series that's not really like weird. I was very frustrated with the end. I feel like Bella deserves more of an understanding on Edward's part of the pain he put her through. And I don't know if we really got that, but that used to be my favorite part of this book. I would always flip to the reunion scene to read like their emotional reunion, and now I'm like, he doesn't suffer enough. Anyway, 5 stars. Loved it. Loved the experience, which cannot be said for Eclipse. I hated this. I gave it 3 stars. I'm trash. It's fine. I gave it 3 stars. It's my least favorite in the series. This is, okay, once again, I don't really need to explain what the Twilight series is about. But over the course of the lifespan of the Twilight series, there have been different phases in society. There was the Twilight sucks, or sorry, the Twilight's amazing phase, followed by the Twilight sucks phase, followed by the nobody cares about Twilight phase, followed by the now, like, Twilight Renaissance, where everybody likes it both ironically and unironically. But at the beginning of the Twilight sucks phase, one of the big things to talk about was how abusive, or how many abusive red flags there are in the relationship between Bella and Edward. And 90% of those red flags happen in this book. Reading this in an audiobook, it's excruciating. On both sides, Edward and Jacob, they're both, like, dicks. Like, I don't like either of them in this book. And it was just very frustrating to read because I know I've liked this book, you know what I mean? But it just wasn't my fave. It just wasn't my fave. I think it's the least interesting of the overall plots, like with the newborn army. I think that the engagement is stupid, and it just wasn't. It wasn't my favorite. And it's a different dislike than I feel about Breaking Dawn. So I gave this 3 stars, and I gave this one 4 stars, but I had more problems with the way that the plot is resolved in this book. This book is a good emotional conclusion to a relationship story, because every relationship is tied up so perfectly it's almost boring. But as a conclusion to the overall conflict with the vampire world, it's like real lacking. It's a lot of hand waving, a lot of like vampire magic, don't worry about it. And I just don't think it's particularly successful. It's also a lot of world building that's just kind of like, there's like, it just kind of throws in there that like half human babies exist, and they grow really, really fast, but only till they're 7, and then they live forever. Like, that's so stupid, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why is that the logical halfway point between constantly changing human and never changing vampire? Why is the halfway point very, very fast change and then no change? Like, am I just overthinking this? Yes. The answer is yes. Don't talk to me about that. Also, they just throw in there that werewolves are real, like real actual moon werewolves. They also exist. Weird. Anyway, I give this 4 stars. The thing is, I can critique it all I want, but the Twilight series, very much informed my reading tastes as a child, and I'm physically unable to read these and dislike them. That's all I can say. I know they're bad. I know, but I can't not like them. Also, I forgot to mention that if you've seen the movie, the one scene in the Eclipse movie where Jasper has a personality, so the scene where he's like training them all how to fight newborns, is my favorite scene in the series. Because it's the only one where Jasper has this personality. I call it the sexy Jasper scene. I'm sorry, I like don't understand why, but I just love that part. Obviously, the entirety of the first movie is better than the rest of the series put together, but except for that scene, which is like 3 minutes long, I can't explain it. But I'm not going to try. I don't need to understand. I don't want to understand. I just want to accept it and move on. Alrighty, that is going to be the end of this video. If you've read any of these books, please let me know what you thought. And if you think you might read any of these books because I said so, or because I mentioned them, please let me know also, because that would be, I keep going like this, I'm sorry, but that would be really, really cool. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!